The ironclad drifted through the empty void, its massive hull reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. Captain Alexia Lex Vance stood at the helm, her sharp gaze fixed on the vastness of space. Every shift of the ship's powerful engines reverberated through the deck, but it was the silence of deep space that kept her focused. A silence she was beginning to find unnerving. "Anything unusual on the sensors, Lieutenant?" Lex asked without looking away from the view. Her voice was calm, but the tension was evident in her posture. Lieutenant Carter, the ship's sensors officer, scanned his console and shook his head. "No, Captain. All systems are nominal. Nothing on the radar. It's just as we expected, quiet out here." Lex grunted in acknowledgement, but the unease gnawed at her. The sector they were traversing had been marked as uncharted on every map they had. The kind of area that could hide any number of threats or dangers. But what they had encountered so far was nothing more than empty space. Too quiet. Could be too quiet, she muttered under her breath, then keyed the ship's intercom. "All crew to full alert. Keep your eyes peeled, people. It's too calm." In the silence that followed, the crew went to work, their movements sharp and efficient. There was a rhythm to their actions, the kind that came with months of training. But even the most experienced crews could be caught off guard in a situation like this. And Lex knew the consequences of complacency. "Captain," Carter's voice broke through the stillness. "We've got an anomaly. It's faint, but it's there." Lex's heartbeat quickened. "Location?" "Off our port side, about 6 light-years out. It's not large, but it's a ship. Definitely not human." Lex's mind raced. "Are they scanning us?" Carter glanced at the console. "Not yet. But they're closing in fast. Helm, plot a course to intercept. No evasive maneuvers yet, keep it calm. They might be curious." "No need to escalate just yet," Lex ordered, but her eyes never left the forward viewport. The ironclad was one of the most advanced ships in the human fleet, but even it wasn't invincible. Seconds later, the quiet hum of the engines intensified as the ship changed course, heading towards the unidentified object. Lex turned to her second-in-command, Commander Thorne, standing beside her. "You think they're hostile?" Thorne's voice was low, his tone professional, but the tension in his eyes betrayed his concern. "I don't know," Lex said, her voice steady. "But if they are, they'll regret it. We've been through worse." Thorne nodded, understanding the implicit promise in her words. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and every time, they had emerged victorious. He trusted Lex's judgment more than anyone else's. Minutes passed, each one stretching into what felt like an eternity. The Zythar ship, if that was what it was, remained on course, but did not make any aggressive moves. It was as if they were waiting for something. Finally, Lex's patience wore thin. "I want a direct scan, Lieutenant Carter. Let's see what we're dealing with." "Aye, Captain. Initiating scan now." The sensors officer's hands flew across the controls, his face lit by the soft glow of the console. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for the scan to process. The crew knew that the first scan of an unknown alien ship could reveal vital information, or lead to a deadly misstep. The seconds dragged on. Then, the screen flickered. Lex's brow furrowed as the data came in. "Captain," Carter said, voice tense, "it's strange. Their ship isn't large, but it's equipped with advanced technology. Something we've never seen before." "Advanced how?" Lex leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. "The ship's hull composition is unlike anything we've encountered. It's almost organic in nature, like it's grown, not built. But it's also reinforced with an energy field we can't penetrate. Their weapon systems are primitive by comparison, but they've got cloaking technology." Lex's jaw clenched. Cloaking technology. That was a problem. It meant they had the ability to hide from even the most sophisticated detection systems. They might have been tracking the ironclad without them even knowing it. "We're being scanned," Carter added, his voice laced with uncertainty. "They're using some kind of probing tech. It's almost like they're trying to read us. They've made a mistake, Lex said coldly, her voice dripping with confidence. We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humans. She turned to Thorn, who was already moving toward the weapons console. Prepare to counteract their scan. Overload their systems, if possible. I want them to know who they're dealing with. Aye, Captain, Thorn replied, his fingers tapping at the console with practiced speed. The Ironclad's weapon systems came online, and the crew held their breath. Captain, they're making their move, Carter warned. The ship is shifting. It's going to attack. Understood. Weapons free. I want their skin knocked offline now. Full power to shields. The order rang out, and a charged silence followed as the crew braced for impact. The lights on the Ironclad flickered as energy surged through its systems. Moments later, the first shot from the enemy ship blasted across the distance, narrowly missing the Ironclad's shields. Return fire, Lex snapped. The Ironclad fired back, its own energy blasts crashing into the alien ship's hull. The unknown craft shuddered, its cloaking field faltering for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Lex's sharp eyes locked onto the data flashing across the console. There it is, she muttered. They're not just any alien race. These are Zythar. The name sent a ripple through the bridge crew. The Zythar Empire was notorious for its ruthless conquests, but humanity had never encountered them before. They thought humans were an insignificant species. Today, that perception was about to change. The Zythar ship, despite its advanced technology, was not prepared for the Ironclad's firepower and human ingenuity. Another volley of laser fire struck the Zythar ship, and the once threatening craft began to crack under the pressure. But something unexpected happened. The Zythar ship didn't retaliate with the force they had expected. Instead, it reversed course and started to flee. Lex stood tall, watching as the enemy ship disappeared into the blackness, leaving only the faintest trace of its energy signature. That was too easy, Thorn said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Lex's eyes narrowed. Don't get comfortable. This isn't over. The Zythar don't run without a reason. They'll be back, and next time, they'll come with more. She turned to her crew. Prepare for the next round. I want the crew ready. We show them humanity's strength. The Ironclad was not just a ship. It was a message. And the Zythar had just received it loud and clear. The Ironclad hung in space, its engines humming softly in the silence. Captain Lex Vance stood at the command center, her eyes scanning the vast blackness of space, still searching for the Zythar ship. The encounter with the alien craft had been swift and brutal, but now, the tension hung in the air. The crew was alert, ready for whatever came next, but the unknown weighed heavily on them. Status report, Lieutenant Carter? Lex's voice was steady, though the slight edge in her tone reflected the unease that gripped her. Carter's fingers danced across his console. The Zythar ship is gone, Captain. They made a full retreat. No sign of them on our sensors. Lex nodded slowly, but she knew better than to think the Zythar had just given up. They never retreated without a plan. The enemy had underestimated them, but they would learn. Lex had fought enough battles to know that a retreat often signaled the beginning of something worse. Get me a communication line to Admiral Forsyth, Lex ordered, turning to face Thorn, her second in command. Thorn didn't miss the gravity of the situation. Aye, Captain. You think the Zythar will come back with reinforcements? I don't think. I know, Lex replied, her gaze hardening. The Zythar don't retreat without reason. They'll be back, stronger. And this time, they'll have their full fleet. As if on cue, the comms crackled to life, and the stern voice of Admiral Forsyth echoed across the bridge. Captain Vance, report. Admiral, we encountered a Zythar ship. They attempted to engage, but they broke off after a brief skirmish. It seems they didn't expect us to retaliate as hard as we did. Lex paused, assessing the situation. But they're regrouping, I'm sure of it. We need reinforcements. There was a brief silence from the other end before Forsyth's voice came back, grim. "You're right, Captain. The Zythar don't act out of impulse. We're scrambling our fleet to your location. Hold position. Help is on the way." Lex's fingers tightened around the console. "Understood, Admiral. But we can't just sit here. The Zythar are calculating. They'll use this time to study us, figure us out. We need to keep moving. If they think we're sitting ducks, they'll hit us hard." "You're correct. Stay alert, Captain. And remember, if they're coming for you, they're not just coming for you. They're coming for Earth." The comm went silent as the Admiral cut off the line. Lex's mind raced. Earth. Her home. The home of billions. It wasn't just a ship they were fighting for anymore. It was everything. Humanity's very survival was on the line. "All crew to full battle readiness," Lex ordered. "I want every officer prepared for combat. Weapons checks, shield diagnostics, and navigation. We don't wait for them to make the next move." Thorn moved to his station. "Aye, Captain. All systems going through diagnostics now." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. The crew moved with precision, each person knowing their task and executing it flawlessly. Lex paced the bridge, her mind running over scenarios, strategies, and contingencies. Every possible outcome played out in her mind, but one thing was clear: the Zythar would not stop until they had what they wanted. They saw humanity as a threat, and threats needed to be eliminated. "Captain, we're detecting a fleet," Carter said suddenly, his voice cutting through the focused hum of the bridge. "Multiple signatures, all Zythar. They've brought reinforcements, at least 4 ships, maybe more. They're on an intercept course." Lex's pulse quickened, but her face remained a mask of calm. "How long until they're in range?" 10 minutes, Captain. They're moving fast. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Thorn, get me a full weapons check. I want our shields fully operational and weapons systems primed." "Aye, Captain," Thorn replied, his voice low but urgent as he relayed commands to the weapons officers. "All power to forward shields. Missiles are loaded, pulse lasers armed." Lex's fingers tapped a rapid rhythm on the console. There was no room for hesitation. The Zythar had made their move, and now it was time to show them the true strength of humanity. She turned to her crew, her eyes locking with each of them. "This is what we've trained for. We don't just survive, we fight. We are humanity's first line of defense, and we will show them exactly why they should be terrified of us. Stay sharp." Her crew nodded in unison, a deep-seated resolve in their eyes. They understood what was at stake. It wasn't just the ironclad, it was Earth itself. As the enemy ships grew closer, Lex could feel the heat of the moment building. The ironclad had a reputation, one forged in the fires of countless battles, but this was different. The Zythar were ruthless, calculating. Their reputation alone had sent shivers through the galaxy. But Lex knew one thing: humanity didn't back down. Not ever. "Zythar ships are entering range," Carter said, voice tight. "They're locking onto our shields." Lex looked out the viewport, her eyes narrowing. The first of the Zythar ships, a massive vessel covered in jagged armor, was now within striking distance. It was a warship, bristling with weapons. But Lex didn't flinch. "Target their engines. Thorn, power up the missile launchers. We take out their mobility first," she ordered. "Aye, Captain," Thorn said, his fingers moving across the console with expert precision. "Missiles locked, Captain. Fire." The ironclad's pulse lasers blazed to life, streaking across the dark expanse and striking the Zythar warship. The alien ship's shields flared brightly before flickering, a momentary weakness. Thorn didn't hesitate, he launched a barrage of missiles, each one slamming into the warship's engines, sending it into a spiral. The Zythar ship groaned under the assault, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the enemy might retreat again. But then, a second Zythar warship opened fire, unleashing a volley of energy blasts that hit the ironclad's shields with a tremendous impact. The ship rocked under the force, alarms blaring across the bridge. "Shields at 60%. Carter called out. "Hull integrity holding, but we can't take much more of that." "Return fire," Lex commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No mercy." The ironclad retaliated with all its might. Each strike from the ship was an answer to the Zythar's arrogant belief that they were the superior species. Every shot, every missile, every maneuver was humanity's declaration that they would not be taken down without a fight. The first Zythar ship staggered back, crippled but not destroyed. The second one had begun to regroup, firing back with renewed intensity. Lex watched, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, it came. "Thorn, take us in close, full throttle," Lex ordered. "On it, Captain," Thorn replied, his voice steady. The ship lurched forward, moving swiftly toward the Zythar fleet. The Zythar were surprised, caught off guard by the ironclad's bold maneuver. It was a mistake they would soon regret. Lex's heart pounded, but her mind was sharp. They were no longer fighting to survive, they were fighting to prove something far greater. The fight had just begun, and humanity was about to make its mark. The chapter ends with the ironclad heading straight into the heart of the Zythar fleet, the crew fully engaged and ready for whatever comes next. The stage was set for a battle that would decide much more than the fate of one warship. It would decide humanity's place in the galaxy. The ironclad tore through the void of space, its engines pushing the massive warship faster than the laws of physics should allow. Lex Vance's eyes flickered across the status reports. Shields were holding steady at 45%, the missiles locked, and the forward cannons charged. Every movement on the bridge was sharp, purposeful. The Zythar fleet was close, and this was no time for mistakes. "Captain, they're about to cross our path," Carter shouted from his station, his face tight with concentration. "Two ships, coming in fast." "Steady," Lex replied, her voice cool despite the rising chaos. "Thorn, I need you to line up a perfect shot on the lead ship. We're taking the first one down hard." "Aye, Captain," Thorn responded, his fingers a blur on the console. The ship lurched as the ironclad adjusted its course, veering sharply to face the oncoming Zythar warships. "Prepare to fire," Lex ordered, her eyes narrowing as the gap closed between them and the enemy. The first of the Zythar ships, a massive, jagged vessel bristling with weaponry, was just a few clicks away. The tension in the air was palpable, a heavy, electric charge that seemed to make every second feel like an eternity. Lex watched the Zythar ship on her console, calculating the exact moment they would cross paths. "Fire," she commanded, her voice a calm force in the storm. The ironclad's pulse cannons unleashed a devastating barrage. The first shot tore through the enemy's forward shields with a violent flash, then the second and third blasts hit their mark, straight into the ship's engines. The Zythar vessel shuddered, its weapons flickering. But it wasn't enough to stop them completely. "They're still firing back," Carter shouted. "Brace for impact." Lex's order came just in time. A blast from the Zythar ship shook the ironclad, sending a shudder through the entire ship. The entire bridge rocked as alarms blared. "Shields holding at 35%, Thorn reported, his voice steady even as his hands worked furiously to keep the ship in one piece. "Hull integrity compromised." "We're taking hits, Captain." "Not good enough," Lex muttered. She tapped a few buttons, opening the comms channel to her entire crew. "This isn't over yet. Everyone, focus on their weaknesses. They've got firepower, but we've got precision. We'll end this now." The ironclad pushed forward, darting toward the next Zythar warship, which had already opened fire. But Lex knew their tactics now. She wasn't going to let them get the upper hand. The second Zythar ship was closing in fast, and Lex's eyes locked onto the readout. This one was slightly larger, more heavily armed. They'd need to neutralize it quickly before it could cause any more damage. "Helm, move to engage." "Thorn, I want everything we've got aimed at their weapons array." Focus fire, Lex commanded, her voice crisp and precise. Thorn didn't hesitate. Aye, Captain. Weapons systems targeted. The ironclad was a well-oiled machine, its crew functioning as a single entity. The seconds felt like an eternity as the distance between them and the Zythar ship closed. Lex's hands tightened around the armrests of her chair as the final moments before combat seemed to stretch on forever. Firing now, Thorn said with finality. The ironclad's weapons erupted once more, this time targeting the massive Zythar ship's weapons array. The pulse lasers raked across the hull, leaving trails of destruction. The Zythar ship's defenses flickered, and Lex saw her opportunity. Now, she shouted. The ironclad launched a volley of torpedoes, which screamed across the void and slammed into the Zythar warship's weapons systems. The impact was catastrophic. The Zythar ship's shields buckled under the intensity of the blasts, and within seconds, the ship exploded in a fiery flash that sent debris scattering in all directions. Target destroyed, Thorn said, his voice tinged with satisfaction, though he didn't allow himself to relax. The battle wasn't over. Lex exhaled slowly, but her eyes never left the viewport. One ship down. The Zythar were formidable, but they were not invincible. We've got more coming in, Carter warned, his voice sharp with urgency. The rest of the Zythar fleet was regrouping, preparing for a final push. Lex's jaw tightened. She could see the rest of the Zythar warships shifting into position, their cannons trained on the ironclad. A sense of inevitability hung in the air. They were closing in for the kill. Thorn, Carter, Lex said, her voice firm. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. I want to keep them off balance. Aye, Captain, Thorn replied, his fingers dancing across the controls. Initiating evasive action now. The ironclad jolted as the ship suddenly veered to the right, narrowly avoiding a massive energy blast that would have ripped through its hull. The Zythar were relentless. They kept firing, even as their ships struggled to regain the advantage. But Lex wasn't going to let them win. She had one final card to play. Activate the disruptor field, Lex ordered, her voice unwavering. We'll take out their targeting systems. Aye, Captain, Carter said, already inputting the command. The ironclad's disruptor field activated with a low hum, casting a ripple of interference across the battlefield. The Zythar ships began to stagger as their targeting systems scrambled, their weapons turning useless as the disruptor field threw their systems into disarray. We've got them, Thorn grinned. They can't lock onto us. Full firepower, Captain. Do it, Lex said, her tone cold. End this. With the Zythar now vulnerable, the ironclad unleashed everything it had. Pulse lasers raked across their hulls, and missiles streaked into the chaos. The alien ships were no longer a threat, they were simply targets. The first Zythar warship exploded into a burst of fire and debris, the blast scattering the remnants of the ship across space. The second warship quickly followed suit. One by one, the rest of the Zythar fleet crumbled under the ironclad's relentless assault. As the final warship fell silent, Lex allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The bridge crew was still, taking in the aftermath of the battle. For a few seconds, no one spoke. We did it, Thorn said quietly. Lex looked around the bridge, her expression hard. We won, but this isn't over. The Zythar will learn from this, and they'll come back stronger. But we'll be ready, Carter added. Lex nodded. We're humans. We always are. As the wreckage of the Zythar fleet drifted in space, the ironclad stood victorious, a symbol of humanity's unyielding will. But Lex knew that the war was far from over. What they had accomplished today was only the beginning. The galaxy had just learned that humanity wasn't a species to be trifled with.